We took it all. We brought them to our land. An endless night, ember hot and icy cold. The rage of the earth. We made this curse. Carved it in the blood on our backs. We did not see. We could not, but she did. And in the end...
What will I become?
Senua's Saga. Hellblade 2.
Play it now with Game Pass.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
From Yuri Tielemans. De Bruyne. And it is Wood-Prowse. Martinelli forward. Still going up. Oh, he's done it again. And City have won the Premier League.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, EPL Index proudly brings to you the best prediction podcast in the world, A Tad Predictable, with your host, Tadiwa Chanakira.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of A Tad Predictable. Yes, post-season edition of A Tad Predictable. We're a bit more loose on this one, not as uptight. The suits upstairs aren't hanging over our heads as much as they do during the season, so we'll have some fun during this post-season one. Obviously, we're going to be discussing the EPL postseason and all of the madness that surrounds it, whether it's transfers, contracts, team tours, everything is going to be covered. Even we might touch on some Euro stuff as well, but obviously with an emphasis and a context surrounding the English Premier League. Obviously, yesterday we rounded up the 23-24 season. We've archived it, as I mentioned yesterday. Some of you might want to look back on that season fondly and might want to maybe hold on to that season a bit longer. And then there are other clubs and fans that wanted that season to end very, very quickly and are glad to see the back of it. But however you look at it, we are now going to be looking forward ahead to the 24-25 season. We're going to be doing what I'm terming sort of the Cliff Notes type series, where I'm going to be looking at each of the teams in the next year's English Premier League, how their season ended last season, their aims for this season coming up, and what they need to do in this summer window in order to achieve those goals. This series is going to be running during the midweek, so Mondays to Fridays, and each podcast is going to be dedicated to one of the 20 teams. As I mentioned in the previous episode, we're doing it in alphabetical order just to make life easier for the hardworking people behind the scenes at A Tad Predictable. So obviously this episode is Arsenal Football Club, and we're going to dive into what they need to do for next season. We'll look at what they did last season in a bit more detail. I know we touched on them slightly in yesterday's show, but yeah, so let's dive in. And let's start from there in terms of what happened last season. If you look sort of overall, you look at what Arsenal did last season. They were in 5 competitions. I'm including the FA Cup, FA Community Shield in there. I know that's a bit controversial. Some people don't include that as a trophy that you're in. But hey, you got to do well to get into it. Either you got to be winning trophies or coming second if City are winning all the trophies as they have done in the past. But yes, Arsenal started the season really, really well, winning the FA Community Shield. Now, whether or not that, meant that their outlook on the rest of the season changed, I personally don't think that should have been the case if it was, because I find the Community Shield is basically like the last preseason game. It counts as a preseason game. Yes, there's bragging rights. Yes, there's a trophy that comes with winning it, but I don't think the teams are really raring to go. And obviously we saw a 1-1 display there. Arsenal winning emphatically on penalties. So well done to them. They get a trophy technically on that one. The rest of the tournaments, maybe they're more bread and butter tournaments. Premier League, they came second, falling short to Man City, the eventual winners. FA Cup, third round exit, that was to Liverpool, and that was quite a pivotal point in the season. And I think when we get to the Liverpool episode of this series, I'm definitely going to dive into that third round FA Cup, because I think it had a big impact on both clubs' trajectory, and I think it's more suited for the Liverpool one, because I'm going to be quite scathing about how they approached that game. The Carabao Cup, Arsenal went out in the fourth round. Again, probably disappointing for Arteta to be heading out of both of those cups so early. I mean, if you're looking at the Carabao Cup itself, they beat Brentford 1-0 in the third round, and then they lost 3-1 to West Ham in the fourth round. So having looked at that, seeing sort of where everything landed, domestically speaking, I think got to be disappointed with how early they got knocked out in the cups. But I do think it did help them when it came to their league form and being able to maintain such a strong showcase throughout the season in the league. And then obviously they had European football to worry about this season, the Champions League no less, and they got knocked out in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. I'm sure they would have wanted to progress further in the Champions League, but unfortunately for them, they faced a team that seems to have the better of them in the Champions League all the time. It's Bayern Munich. I think Arsenal are sick of Bayern Munich in the Champions League, and I guess heading into next season, one of their hopes is that they don't face Bayern Munich next season, because it seems like it's only going one way every time they do. So yeah, taking a step back, looking at it, I think for the Champions League, it's the first time they're really cutting their teeth in the Champions League for a good while now, at least from a standpoint where they feel they have a competitive team. So maybe slight disappointment in going out so early in terms of quarterfinals based on their aspirations. But I do think quarterfinals is there and thereabout of maybe where this team is in terms of still growing. They've still got quite a young nucleus of a team. They still have a little bit of inexperience of playing regular Champions League football year in, year out. So I do think that was a factor as well. Being able to manage a league title challenge and being competitive in the Champions League is very, very difficult to do. But yeah, as I said, disappointment with the domestic cups heading out that early. I'm sure Arteta maybe will have a bit more of an eye on being able to be more successful in those tournaments heading into next season. I mean, if you look at the fact that he hasn't won a trophy since that FA Cup trophy he won quite early on in his Arsenal tenure as manager. And obviously, they've spent quite a lot of money in recent years, and they haven't seen... I mean, they've seen progress in the team. You can't deny that. I mean, look at their standing in the Premier League, back-to-back, coming second place to, obviously, the juggernaut that is Man City is nothing to sort of shun. But I do think it's getting to that awkward stage where they do need to start putting pressure on Arteta to win trophies. I don't think it's a, trophies or bust type of situation yet. I still think they're growing, they're developing. As long as they're growing and developing as a team and improving year on year, logically they should get over the hump in terms of getting a trophy, whether it is in the league or trying to get one of the cups. So let's swiftly move on then to what aspirations they'll have for this season. We've summed up what happened last season. I think I'll just continue a little bit more on last season with regards to the Premier League, because that's going to have implications on their aims for this season. I do think that Arteta needs to be more aggressive in the games against Man City. We saw the cautious approach for them this time around, and they've seemed to do that year in, year out now against Man City, where they're happy not to get embarrassed, it feels like, and they'll try and win the league elsewhere. It's very difficult with the points accumulations that City seem to get throughout the years, and also just the season management of City being able to just do enough. How many times have they just beaten Liverpool to the league title? How many times have they twice now just beaten Arsenal sort of towards the tail end of the season in the Premier League? If you beat them in those games against them, that puts a bit more pressure on them. They have to go find those points elsewhere, and maybe they can start making mistakes. I do think Arsenal have to start looking at those games and targeting them and being more aggressive and trying to take it to City. And as I said in the last episode yesterday, if you want to beat City in the title race, you have to beat City in these fixtures. It almost feels like that, and hopefully Arteta heeds that and goes into next season with a bit more of an aggressive approach when it comes to those games. But yeah, so next season for Arsenal, we're looking at what they could possibly do. I mean, Premier League, I do think the continuity in terms of their starting 11 is going to be a real big factor for them. It's going to be very beneficial to them. You're looking at the teams that on paper usually would be challenging. A Chelsea, for example, they're still a young squad, very early in their redevelopment. I don't see them being title challengers next season. You've obviously got Man United. They've got their issues. They're trying to turn it around, but I don't think they're going to be able to turn it around in time for next season. You've got Liverpool, brand new manager. It might take him time to settle in. So there's a question mark there whether or not there will be title challengers. I think it would be very impressive if a new manager comes in there and is challenging for the title straight away, especially coming from the Dutch league. No disrespect to the Dutch league, but it is a fact that there is a jump between the Dutch league and the Premier League, and that goes for managers and signings. We've seen very successful managers come from the Dutch league and struggle in the Premier League. We've seen very successful players come from the Dutch league and struggle in the Premier League. So I'm cautious of that jump, but again, there are always exceptions to the rule. So we'll see how Slot handles that. But this is not about Liverpool. This is about Arsenal. So yeah, as I said, Liverpool question mark whether they'll be challenging there. Tottenham, a bit more continuity for them, but I think last season showed they've still got a lot of work to do in terms of building a squad that can last an entire season and be competitive in terms of challenging for the title throughout the course of a season. I think they've got talent in their squad. I think they're approaching things the right way. It appears that way, at least early on in Ange's tenure there. And they're starting to make the right moves and do the right things. But again, I think next year is going to be too early for that. Maybe they'll be looking for sort of top four, challenging for top four next season. I know Spurs fans won't want to hear that, but that's just the reality of where the club is at the moment. So I've sort of gone through everyone. Obviously, we know Man City are Man City. They're going to be there. They're going to be very tough to beat, and Arsenal have to go beat them. I think Arsenal are the best positioned club in England to go and beat Man City to the title. Whether it's the fatigue for Man City of just going back to back to back of winning titles, or just maybe an extra motivation for the Arsenal players where we've fallen short twice. It's now time to get over the hump. Could see them do it. Again, doing it and wanting to do it is completely separated, and it's very, very difficult to do with the standards that City have set, where you have to get 90 points just to be in the conversation. My concern with the league for Arsenal, where yes, we're going to get into the squad and get into the minutiae of that in a little bit, and we'll see concerns with regards to that. squad depth specifically, but if you look at Arsenal over the last 2 seasons, they've been quite fortunate in terms of injuries and not suffering too many impactful injuries, should I say. Yes, every team has injuries, then, you know, and every team always feels like their injury situation is worse than everyone else's. I appreciate that, but objectively looking at things, sitting back, assessing Arsenal's situation, and it's credit to the medical department there, it's credit to Arteta. They've been able to keep their key players relatively fit for the important moments in the season, and that's been key to them. Can they do it a third year? Maybe they just are unlucky with injuries next year. It happens. Sometimes, you know, these injuries are injuries that are impact injuries that you could probably not even prevent. You couldn't prevent, or you couldn't plan for. You know, it happens. And I just think that is probably my biggest cause for concern when it comes to Arsenal are they due some injury concerns throughout the season, and seeing whether or not they have a big enough squad to handle that. Obviously, you don't wish any injury on any player. Well, certainly I don't, and I'd hate to see some of their players get injured, but I'm just cautious about that and whether or not they're sort of coming due. Again, you have players like Bukayo Saka who just get kicked left, right, and center, and play through injury a lot. I mean, last season, and probably the season before that, Saka was injured, and yet he played the whole season. Saka was injured this past season. He played basically the whole season, and he's got Euros coming up this summer. Does he go to the Olympics? I hope not, for Arsenal fans' sake. But these things start to add up, and it wears on the body. Can he go another season where he's being, you know, the sort of the talisman for Arsenal? It's asking a lot for him. I have concerns for Saka from a long-term perspective. God forbid they Jack Wilshere him, you know, where they rely on him too heavily too early in his career, and he's not able to have longevity. That would be a horrible way to see Saka's career goes. He's such a beautiful player to watch. I hope he has a long and fruitful career. But yeah, concerns with regards to Arsenal's injury luck next season, or maybe, you know, however you want to look at it. In terms of what they can hope for, what they must be aiming for next season, I think first and foremost, probably the big thing Arsenal fans want, obviously there's the Champions League that they do want to get, so they can just sort of take that one off. But get over the hump on the Premier League. Coming so close 2 years in a row really does eat at you. So hopefully for them, I'm assuming they're hoping to go one better this time and go and win the league title. If they are to win the league title next season, I don't see a pathway to them doing that if they go far in the domestic cup. So I think it has to be like what happened this season. Sorry, Arsenal fans. I think bin the domestic cups and focus on the league and the Champions League. I just don't think they have a big enough squad to be able to challenge on all fronts. So you got to pick and choose. You got to pick your struggle here. And I think Arteta has been good in rotating when it comes to the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup. And we've seen that, I guess, to Arsenal's detriment with the losses that they faced last season. But it does help you when it comes to squad management, game management, training management, heading into games where you've now got a whole week to prepare or 2 weeks to prepare, opposed to having a midweek game and a game on the weekend. And certainly when you don't have a squad big enough to handle all of that. So, yeah, if I was Arsenal, I'd bin the domestic cups, focus on the league. Champions League, I think, look, it's hard to win the Champions League. We've seen that, and we've seen so many great Arsenal sides, far better Arsenal sides than the one they have now, get close and not win it. So that one, I think, from an Arsenal perspective, the mentality should be, we'll give it our best, we'll give it a good go, but we're not putting all our eggs in that basket. Certainly not with the record that we have in the Champions League. Focus on the Premier League. Let's get that Premier League title back at the Emirates, would be what I'm saying if I was an Arsenal fan. And how do we do that? How do we do that if we're Arsenal? Well, one way to do that is to make sure your squad is robust enough to handle a full season. As I said, I'm concerned about Arsenal and injuries next season. I think the wear and tear might start to creep in this season, and certainly next season if it doesn't this season. So looking at Arsenal's squad, I've had a look at it. The team has looked at it. We've assessed where maybe the gaps are, what they need to do to secure themselves for next season, so they're in a healthy position to be able to withstand what is coming next season.
We took it all. We brought them to our land. An endless night, ember hot and icy cold. The rage of the earth. We made this curse. Carved it in the blood on our backs. We did not see. We could not, but she did. And in the end,
What will I become? Senua's Saga. Hellblade 2.
Play it now with Game Pass.
Bearing in mind, as I said, there are Euros this year, so a lot of their players would have been participating in the Euros and sort of have to go into the season not having had a restful full pre-season, and that has an impact as well on how these players are able to manage the rest of the season. So looking at Arsenal's squad here, we've got obviously Arteta. I think it's fair to say it's a 4-3-3 system. Left back is a very, very glaring issue for Arsenal because we've got, I guess they brought in Zinchenko to try and solve that problem. I'm not convinced by him being the long-term solution for Arsenal there. And if anything, there are rumors of him obviously looking to go elsewhere, or at least certainly clubs are looking at him. And he's open to the idea, it seems, the idea of him going elsewhere. I'm not convinced by Kiwior. I don't think he's a starting left back. I think he's a great debutant in terms of being the backup. But surely a big thing for Arsenal this coming transfer window is signing a starting left back to fill that role in behind Martinelli and support Martinelli and obviously support that defense. Now, the issue for me with Arsenal is because the squad depth, and you'll see what I mean when we discuss the squad depth in a bit, why I'm concerned about it. They do have a left back who probably could do a decent job for them in Kieran Tierney, but for some reason him and Arteta have fallen out, and I can't understand how Arsenal manage their squad from a transfer window perspective. And maybe let me reel it back a bit and talk about that, and then we'll go into maybe the finer details of, the issues with like a Tierney. As I mentioned earlier, pressure has to start racking up for Arteta to win trophies, largely because he's been there for a while now, and the amount of money he spent in recent years. He has spent an awful lot of money, and in my opinion, him and Edu, yes, money has been spent. Arsenal fans may argue money has been spent well. I don't think money has been spent as well as it could have been. And the reason I'm saying that is I think they've been double dipping in certain situations. I'm looking at their squad. You've got Timber, you've got Tomiyasu, you've got Ben White, right? Ben White was signed obviously to come in as a centre back. That failed. He had to move to the right back. He's done an admirable to very good job there at right back. So he's now a right back for Arsenal. Maybe a backup centre back, and we'll get to the situation they have at backup centre back in a bit. But so that's his role now. Starting right back, backup for centre back. Why? And you have Tomiyasu, who is the backup right back. Okay, you've got him in your squad. Why go and spend money on Timber? Why go buy a Jurian Timber? It makes absolutely no sense to me. If you're Arsenal, if you know you've got Ben White playing there, you know you've got Tomiyasu going there, you're keeping Tomiyasu. I'd understand if they were selling Tomiyasu and then they said, look, we got space there. Him and Ben White can compete for the position. We want to make it competitive and have a good, healthy competition going there. But going and spending 40 mil on Timber when you've already got a starting right back and a backup right back is, to me, just such a waste of money. Think of where that money could have been used, like buying a legitimate left back or buying a proper defensive midfielder. We'll get to that. Or arguably, some people might say they could have invested in a striker. And maybe that's what would have gotten them over the line in terms of the Premier League last season. But yeah, I have an issue with that. I have an issue with signings like Fabio Vieira. You have an Emil Smith-Rowe that is sort of that utility midfielder that could maybe do a job out wide as well. I don't see why you're spending 35 million on Vieira when you've got Smith-Rowe's, you've got Reece Nelson's in your squad that can do the job that he's doing and give you the benefit of not just homegrown, but homegrown from your own club. Spend that money elsewhere, man. It's just nonsensical. You go and you sign Aaron Ramsdale. You go and you give him a big contract. And a couple of months later, you go and you get Raya. Like, what is going on? I can't understand why Arsenal are double dipping when it comes to spending money. And you obviously then look at how much is being spent, and then you look at how much is being spent on the same position time and time again. And then also you have Gabriel Jesus. Okay, you bring him in, spend 50 million on him, 52 million if I'm not mistaken. You say, all right, you were at City, you were not happy with the fact that you were sort of the second guy at City. Come and be our starting striker. All right, you bring him in. Next season, you're bringing Havertz in. Okay, now maybe Havertz was bought in to come in as a midfielder and it didn't quite work out there and they've moved him forward and he's done well there. If that was the situation, fine. Fair enough with that. But again, it's two players, big signings, 75 million for Havertz. Obviously, you got as I said, the 52 million for Gabriel Jesus. I just don't understand. I don't understand why they're spending money in this way. I just think they could have been more fruitful with their finances. So, having addressed those issues, I'm looking at the left back situation and I'm saying you've got a Tierney there. He can definitely do a job that's required for that position for Arsenal. You can save some money by by keeping him there and starting there. If you sell him, and only if you sell him, not if you loan him out, not if he's staying in the squad. If you sell him for decent money, then go get a replacement. This whole thing of Arsenal buying players whilst they've recently bought players, I know maybe Tierney wasn't from the Arteta regime, but so maybe he's got a pass there. But buying players when you've already got a player that you've recently bought in that position just shows poor long-term planning, in my opinion. So you've got Tierney there, use him there. Let's spend the money elsewhere because we're going to need it, because we're going to be going big in other positions, in my opinion. So we're looking at, if Arsenal are insistent on, no, we need a new left back, come hell or high water, whether Tierney is staying or going, we don't care. Hopefully he goes so we can get some money, but we're bringing in a left back. Then I've got a couple of people that I would suggest for Arsenal to bring in. So I've got some players that I think that could fulfill that sort of, I'm seeing it as an inverted sort of wing back role that Arsenal employ on that left hand side. I don't know if you could prize away a Jose Gaya from Valencia. He seems very settled there. He's had opportunities in the past to move to the Premier League and he has rebuffed them. One of them was Arsenal a couple of years back. Interesting point. So whether or not they could prize him away, but I think if you could get him between 30 and 40 million, you could probably persuade Valencia with the financial situation they're in to part ways with him. But again, as I said, it might take some convincing to bring him in. He's been reluctant to leave Valencia and he's been quite outspoken about that. the option then that I would probably go for is Calafiore from Bologna. I think he's a very good left back, can at a stretch, you can also deputize in that centre back position. And the reason I'm pointing that out is because Arsenal seem to be doing it on the right hand side, where they're signing right backs who can also play at centre back at a push if there are injuries. They're the cover there. Well, he can do that. He can fulfill that job. Really exciting left back. I think he would do a good job bombing forward for Arsenal, as a decent passing range, which is obviously going to be needed, and why Arsenal bought in Zinchenko to fulfill that role is because they needed someone there that can dictate tempo, dictate how the game is flowing a little bit from the left back position. I definitely think Ricardo can fulfill that role. So yeah, that's who I would be going to get from Arsenal. Obviously, you have the likes of Estepinian if you want a more direct, energetic box-to-box left back. The injury concerns maybe give me pause for Arsenal going for him. So we'll park it with him. But yeah, for me, I would keep Tierney first and foremost, because I do think we need to be careful with the spending a bit here. We want to maybe try and spend big in other positions that aren't of need. But if they're insistent on they have to bring in a left back, then obviously Calafiore would be the man for me for Arsenal to bring in from Bologna. Looking at another position, and I'm currently going with the starting lineup positions, and then we'll look at sort of the squad depth situation a bit later on. Obviously, goalkeeper Ramsdale, there are the rumours that he's on the way out. Likes of Newcastle are looking at him. As I said, they bought him. They gave him a big contract and then bought in as a replacement. That replacement was on loan. He's imminently about to rejoin Arsenal. Obviously, Arsenal had the option to buy for 27 million for Raya. It appears as though it probably would have been a straight purchase last season, but for Arsenal just being cautious from a financial perspective. So yeah, that deal should be done within the next couple of days. Raya coming back to be the number one for Arsenal. Maybe they need to go and look at another backup goalkeeper if Ramsdale is leaving. But yeah, I think it's time to cash in on Ramsdale, especially if Raya is going to be number one. I don't see how, one, Ramsdale would be happy staying as a backup, and two, how is that going to impact the dressing room? Having a player like Ramsdale that was promised he was going to be the starter when he came in, got given a big contract, reassuring the fact that he was going to be a starter, only for a couple of months later for him to be replaced. It's probably better that they do get rid of him. So Raya comes in and fills in that goalkeeper position. That's perfectly fine. We've got the left back position sorted out. The next position that I think Arsenal need to sort out urgently, and this is probably the more important one in my opinion. Again, as I said, Tierney can fill in. Just whatever the bad blood is between him and Arteta, just resolve it and let him do a job at least for one season for you there. But one position they do need to fill, defensive midfielder. I think some people were suggesting that Declan Rice plays the defensive midfielder and then they bring in another more attacking midfielder. I think that will just be limiting the potential of Declan Rice and what he brings to that Arsenal team, the energy, the drive, he pops up with goals every now and then as well. I don't want to take that away from his game. So keep Declan Rice next to Odegaard and sort of bring in a shield behind them that can just sort of protect them, keep it simple, recycle the ball when they win it back. Obviously, Arteta has two different styles of midfielders that have been playing sort of that more defensive role from the midfield three. He's either been playing, obviously you have Thomas Partey, who I don't really want to discuss. I think he's on the way out and if Arsenal can get rid of him, then great. They need to replace him. He's more of the defensive midfielder shield type of situation. And then on the other hand, Arsenal have Jorginho, who they've obviously renewed his contract. They've given him an extra year on his contract, so he's staying for next season. He's more like a ball-playing defensive midfielder. So, which one is it, Arteta? Which one would you rather invest more heavily in? Do you want to bring in a defensive midfielder a la Jorginho and have them be more of sort of pulling the strings, or do you bring in someone that you want to sort of be a screen that can be really good? In my opinion, they need someone that can be really good from running from side to side, making sure they're cutting out any counterattacks from teams, stopping the build-up from teams, just breaking up play from other teams, recycling the ball, and Arsenal continue to put pressure and wave after wave of pressure on other teams. That, obviously, you can probably guess from the way I'm talking about it, that's probably where I'd be leaning. I would be going to more of a defensive-minded player rather than a ball-playing defensive player. I think they do need a more energetic, a more physical defensive midfielder in there. Now, with that in mind, maybe let me just cover the ball-playing one, because I've only got one name really that I would suggest for Arsenal if they were going to be going down that route. Obviously, Zubimendi, phenomenal player, young player that's coming up at San Sebastian. He's had another good season, and his reputation continues to grow. He's a phenomenal passer of the ball, can play that defensive role, not as mobile though, in my opinion, as some of the other people that I'm going to be speaking about. So he would be more in that Jorginho mold of yes, being the defensive, the more defensive of the three, but still having that passing range, still being able to unlock defenses and that type of thing. So he would be my option if they're going that route. But I do think they need to go more of a, I guess I'll call it an Manuel Ugarte role, because that's the player I have as the number one option for Arsenal to go and get. Go check with PSG. He's not really been sort of the player maybe that they were, or the player that they promised him he would be when he signed for them, because he had a lot of options in terms of where he could go, but he chose PSG, and I don't think it's quite worked out as well as either Ugarte or PSG would have thought it would have worked out last season. And I'm sure if Arsenal can come in and try and, get him out of PSG, I think maybe there might be an appetite for him. I mean, he only played 25 games last season in the league, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he's a player that I think could be gotten. If they can't get Ugarte, hear me out. Manu Kone, Borussia Mönchengladbach, obviously suffered that big injury last season that probably derailed his chance to get a big move last season. But yes, he's probably closer to the Declan Rice mold in that he's got the appetite to go forward. But if you can sell him on the dream of coming into this young Arsenal team that's hungry, that's going to be going for trophies over the next couple of years, you can see they're all maturing at the same time. They're all reaching their peak at the same time. And you say, look, you come in and you just be our destroyer. You be our Mascherano. Mascherano will probably be the best comp that you can give for what Arsenal need. Someone that just comes and cleans house for them. And if you can sell the dream to Manu Kone, he's got the energy level. He's still got the talent to be involved in attacking play, to adventure forward if you need him to, maybe in those games that teams are really parking the bus and Arsenal need, they don't need that proper anchor at the back. They need a defensive midfielder that's going to get more involved. He can do it all, I think, in midfield. But if you can fine-tune him and make him more of that sort of ball-winning defensive midfielder as a speciality, and then everything else that he brings in will be sort of that extra little spice. I think that would be a great signing for Arsenal to come in, start in midfield for them. If you've got a Manu Kone, Declan Rice, Martin Odegaard midfield, that's bags of energy, bags of talent, youth, exciting players. I think that would be a very, very formidable midfield. Now, in terms of starting lineup, I'm assuming Havertz keeps the jersey. He ended the season really well last season. I don't see a reason why they'll take the jersey off of him as the false nine up front for them. The pause comes in because we know Arsenal have been rumoured to be looking for a striker, but more a traditional number 9, which is quite interesting because that's not what Havertz has been playing. That's not the style that Havertz has been playing. And again, this whole thing with Arsenal of buying players in positions for big money that do the opposite to what the other person is doing, it doesn't quite gel with me. But Benjamin Sesko is more the traditional 9. He's more sitting on the on the shoulder of the defender, trying to break in behind, rather than necessarily a Havertz that's going to link up play and intertwine and passing and moving and using that sort of intelligence of playmaking to drive Arsenal forward. Sesko is going to be at the end of things. He's not going to be starting the moves. He's not going to be involved in the moves. It's almost like he almost suits more a Chelsea style of football, where Chelsea have always had forwards who don't get involved in the build-up, just finish it off, mate. And I guess the mold that Man City have gone to with Erling Haaland, doesn't touch the ball much during the game, but is there to finish the chances off. That's what Arsenal would be getting if they were going down the Benjamin Sesko route. It would be a shift from the style of football that they have been playing. Because even when Gabriel Jesus was playing up front for them early on, he was getting involved in the build-up play. You'd see him on the wing. You'd see him chasing people down. I just don't see that for Benjamin Sesko. So I do find that quite interesting. Obviously, maybe it's an evolution. Maybe this is the next phase for Arteta. This is where he sees the club going. And we've seen them linked with Sesko. We know they like Isak. We know they've flirted with an Osimhen in the past. Those are more traditional 9. So maybe they are evolving. But I don't know, and it doesn't seem like they have the money for Osimhen. I don't know, and it doesn't seem like they have the money for Isak. Obviously, what I'm saying is they don't have the money in the context of everything else that they need to do this window in order to bolster their squad. If it was just a once-off signing, yes, they could go and get those players. But I think Benjamin Sesko is the younger, cheaper version of an Isak or an Osimhen, and I think that's probably why he's at the forefront in terms of the links to them. The interesting one with Rashford being linked with them, that he's going to come with big wages, man. I don't know. That one's a curious one. We'll see if that turns out. But yeah, those are probably the signings that I would be making if I was Arsenal. The forward line, as I said, I'd keep Havertz, and then maybe you just keep Gabriel Jesus for another season, and we say, look, we've got enough firepower. Goals weren't an issue for Arsenal last season. And if we solidify that midfield, we bring in that left back in defense, I think Arsenal will get goals. We've got Saka out wide. We've got Martinelli, who probably needs to kick on. I think this is the season where Martinelli needs to re-announce himself and become a focal point again for Arsenal. And if he can do that, then you definitely don't need to bring in a traditional number 9. I'm curious why the links to Ivan Toney have sort of just drifted away. Yes, he's a 9, but he could be the hybrid of between the Havertz and the Sesko type, because we know Ivan Toney can hold the ball up. He can bring players in. He's quite good at linking play, and we also know he's a deadly finisher up front. More so when he's taking penalties, the boy don't miss. So maybe if they want the hybrid type of answer to that solution, maybe go get an Ivan Toney. But let's move on to Arsenal's depth, okay? Because this is concerning for me. But before we get to that, I'll let you guys mull over. Maybe you can think about what that depth is. But let's just go to a quick break. Obviously, this podcast is presented by EPL Index in association with Liberty Shield. Liberty Shield is a VPN provider. You guys, it's so easy to use. If you download the software, it downloads straight onto your devices and you can sort of get going straight away. Or if it's a router, it will get delivered to you. If you use the coupon code EPL25, you'll get 25% off on that router or the software VPN. It's obviously a virtual private network. It facilitates whether you want to stay safe when you're using public Wi-Fi, whether you don't want to get locked out of your bank account when you're traveling, whether you want to unlock geo-locked content, like Netflix, for example, they geo-lock stuff. If you want to unlock the US Netflix content, for example, then Liberty Shield is definitely something for you. NBA is going to be on tonight. Obviously, that's breaking the fourth wall there in terms of time of recording this podcast. But game one of the NBA Finals is going to be on tonight. I'm not worried about how I'm going to watch that because I know I've got Liberty Shield and I'll be able to watch it guaranteed. So definitely go and check those guys out. We appreciate them for sponsoring the show. But let's take a quick break and we'll be right back after this short break. All right, we are back. We've spoken about Arsenal, what happened last season. We've spoken about what they should be aiming for this season. And we've looked at the squad and maybe what they can do, what they should be doing, looking to do this summer. Squad depth for me is an issue. From the forward line, obviously, if you keeping Gabriel Jesus, you've got him as sort of a utility player. You can play anywhere in that front line, maybe more traditionally up front in the middle. Trossard is a phenomenal backup player. I think they've done really well with him, and he's going to be key for them next season, just chipping in with his goals. Reece Nelson is a youngster that probably needs to continue his development and stepping up his game and consistency next season. You'd assume that that's going to be the case. So with those three, I'm okay. I'm okay with that from that perspective. It's further down below where we start getting issues. Midfield, it's Jorginho and that's it. We know Sambi Lokonga has had discussions with Arsenal already. The conclusion of those discussions is probably best that he leaves. He still has a year left on his contract. He still has another further option year on his contract as well. So if Arsenal are going to loan him out again, they could then trigger that extension and still be able to maintain his value. But based on the conversations that he had with Arsenal, the decision was it's probably best he goes permanently away from Arsenal. He could have been sort of a player that they could have used as a backup in midfield. I mentioned Thomas Partey, he's probably leaving, so he's not an option there. We're looking then at Smith Rowe. I think Arsenal should keep Smith Rowe from a homegrown perspective. As I said, especially from an Arsenal homegrown perspective, I think they should keep him. But if I was Smith Rowe from a selfish perspective, I'd be leaving. I think the disrespect of signing Vieira would have done it for me. I think he's stagnated. His career is not going anywhere at Arsenal. They've clearly shown him what they think of him. He needs to move if he does want to progress his career and develop more as a footballer, in my opinion. Otherwise, he's just going to stagnate there. But yeah, so from an Arsenal perspective, I would keep him. If I was Smith Rowe, I would be looking to move elsewhere. If Eze leaves Crystal Palace, if I'm Smith Rowe, I'm thinking, hey guys, I get to stay in London. Crystal Palace look like they're doing things. That could be a tasty move for them. But yeah, so if Smith Rowe goes, then they've just got Jorginho. They need backup. They need to go and get a couple of young or experienced midfielders, but they need to go get some midfielders that can sit behind a Declan Rice, a Manekone if he comes in, or an Agat, if that's who they bring in, and an Odegaard as well. Vieira, I don't know what they're going to do with him. Again, if he goes, they need to bring in someone else. If he stays, maybe he can be that utility player that tries to fill those roles. I don't know if he can do it admirably or to a level that's going to satisfy me personally. And I guess I'm not an Arsenal fan, so who cares? Jorginho will deputize in that defensive role, but again, it's going to be different to what I envision Arsenal need in that role. So there might be confusion there. If their starting defensive midfielder gets injured, what happens then? They're going to have to change their style of play, something to keep an eye on and to see how much involvement will Jorginho have heading into next season. So bring in Monokone, bring in 2 other midfielders, maybe one midfielder, and promote someone from the youth team. Could be a possibility for Arsenal, obviously, looking at their younger squads. They've got a couple of midfielders that did go out on loan. Obviously, Patino is one of the higher touted ones. He's more of an advanced midfielder, but if he can maybe deputize to Odegaard, and sort of Odegaard takes him under his wing, that could be quite cool for Arsenal. So Monokone and another, and then get Patino more involved is what I would be looking to do. Defense for Arsenal. Left back up, Kiwior, perfectly fine. I'm happy with that. Right back situation, they've got too many. I think Tomiyasu needs to get sold. Timber is now there. Obviously, he had the big injury last season, so they're going to be cautious with him, and maybe that's why Tomiyasu has hung around as long as he has. But Ben White, Timber, Tomiyasu, that's too much. One of them has to go, and I'm assuming the odd one out would be Tomiyasu there. Centre-back situation, I'm not happy with the backups. Rekic, not for me. Obviously, you have Gabriel and Saliba. If one of them go down, I think Arsenal are going to have a problem next season because I don't see any depth there. In terms of what do? Do you bring in a more experienced centre-back? Because we know how, you've got youth there with Saliba. You've got, obviously, Gabriel there as well, who is someone that's 25, relatively youthful from that perspective. So bringing in another young one, a young talented player, could be difficult to convince them that they're going to have a pathway to the first team. But again, if I'm Arteta, I'm saying, look, we play a lot of games at Arsenal because we're so good now. We're going deep into competitions. You will get games, and try and bring in someone there. If they're not bringing in a young player, maybe a more experienced one that can just deputize, can come in, be stable. I think I'd probably lean more younger and hope that it's someone that can develop behind a Saliba and Gabriel, and then when they get to that awkward stage where they either are banging at the door to be starting, you can then make the decision of, do I sell a Gabriel and promote the young player, or do I sell the young player for a profit, use that money to go and buy some more young players and develop them and continue that cycle. I know some clubs do that quite well. Chelsea, for example, in the previous regime, did that very, very well, of just using their own young players that they've brought into the club to fund their youth system going forward with the amount of sales that they did there. So yeah, Arsenal, young player. In terms of, I don't know if they can go get a Scavini and he'll be willing to sit in behind Gabriel and Saliba, or if you can go get an Inacio and convince him to leave Sporting to come and be a backup. It's going to have to be someone maybe a tier below that, that is looking promising and is willing to sit on the bench but knows they're going to get a chance in the future. So yeah, I would expect Arsenal to bring in at least another centre-back this window. Someone that when or if a Saliba or a Gabriel goes down, the level doesn't drop too much from them, and that should help them maintain. I think that covers Arsenal. It was a lot to get through. Again, to summarize, I think focus on the Premier League, bin the cups, do what you can in the Champions League, but don't expect to be going far in it. You can hope to go far in it, but don't expect. I think that the goal for Arsenal should be the Premier League, because I think it's a lot more achievable than some of the other ones. Going long in the domestic cups, it's an effort. You'll end up suffering in maybe the tournaments that Arsenal value a bit more later on in the season. And again, maybe this is a Liverpool fan speaking from experience, with a wiser, older head, should I say, from our past experiences of trying to go for everything and ending up with the ones you didn't necessarily value as highly as the other ones. focus on the league if I'm Arsenal. Make sure you bring in a defensive midfielder. Make sure it's a more ball-winning defensive midfielder. Make sure you sort out that left-back situation, whether it is shaking hands and drawing a line in the sand with Kieran Tierney and saying, look, let's focus on getting you in for this season. And if it works out, you stay. If it doesn't, at least you showcased yourself and you can get a move next season. If that doesn't work out, then go and get a left-back. And obviously, I've suggested in terms of left-backs who they should go get. They should go to Bologna. They should go and get Calafiore. I don't think they can get a Gaia out of Valencia with how loyal he is to them. That is going to do it for another episode of A Tad Predictable. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Obviously, go and check out all of the content on EPL Index. We've got transfer news. We've got contract news. We've got literally everything that you could want when it comes to the Premier League. We've got you covered. We've also got a couple of podcasts that will be going out this week. We've got transfer update podcasts that go out daily. We've got the Two Footer podcast with Dave Hendrick that goes out daily as well. And obviously, from a social media perspective, guys, go and follow EPL Index on Twitter. Go and follow at A Tad Predictable on Twitter. If you want to follow me as well, go follow me at Tad Predicts on Twitter. Share with me your thoughts on what I've said about Arsenal, the changes that I would make. What changes would you make? Which players are you looking at? I know, for example, the rumors in terms of Arsenal, they've got, obviously, Nico Williams was linked with them a couple of days ago. He's an exciting winger. Again, would he be willing to come into Arsenal and sort of be a bench player looking to make an impact and come in? I don't know. I think he could be starting at a lot more other clubs and probably will end up going with that option. I mentioned Sesko, Xerxes, the forward, young Joshua. Again, a Bologna player. If I'm going to Bologna, I've already told you who to go get. But I guess if you want to go get Xerxes and you're thinking, look, maybe we can give you guys a 2-for-1 special here, and for example, that Eddie Nketiah is going to be leaving, then yeah, maybe you can go get him. But yeah, I'm not convinced on that one. Obviously, I mentioned Isak as well. He's been linked with them, but I don't know if Arsenal have the money to do that and everything else that they need to do this window. Guys, please go and subscribe to EPL Index podcast channel on your podcast providers. Give us 5 stars, write positive comments. That stuff really does go a long, long way. Tomorrow, we're going to be discussing Aston Villa. Obviously, Unai Emery was our A Tad Predictable manager of the season. Huge congratulations to Aston Villa. They obviously have Champions League football next season, which means they're going to be looking at their squad in a whole different way. So it's going to be exciting tomorrow. We get to delve in and see how we tackle Villa's off-season, what moves we'll be looking to make. I can certainly tell you that another team that probably will be looking in midfield again, but maybe for different reasons to what Arsenal were looking at it for. As I said, Arsenal need a defensive midfielder to come in and start and make a difference. We know Aston Villa have 2 of those that are very good in Douglas Luiz, who, again, transfer rumors regarding him. Boubacar Kamara, obviously, another one who they will be hoping to have back in time for next season. But guys, huge thank you to Obi Semenya and Jody McKenna's. Obi's at John Empire SA and Jody's at Spursy 141 for our guest intros. Huge thank you to our producer behind the glass, Mr. Guy Drinkle. He's at Guy Drinkle on Twitter. I've been Tadiwa Chanakira at Tad Predicts on Twitter. And remember, Chisinga Perry, Chinashura.
And still, Salah, oh, sensational! Son had a goal and scored a beauty!
Oh, what a strike from Yuri Tielemans!
De Bruyne! And it is Ward-Prowse!
Social Podcast Network.